You wrote a Medium piece about your book, and I encourage everybody to read the full thing. But this quote here really is a great summary of a lot of what you try to argue. In your book, you explain how a mutual distaste for dualist philosophies that place the will of the soul, i.e., what the soul or mind thinks about itself, above the material form of the body, i.e., what the body naturally is, brought some evangelical theologians and feminist theories together in the mid 20th century. So there's a lot to chew on there. Can you explain that and what those philosophies mean in practice and why this connection, now that we bring it back to Terfs, was forged with evangelicals?
Yeah, absolutely. So this will sort of circle back to the issue of the worth of the worthwhileness, I guess, of this as an electoral strategy. So in particularly the 20th century, mid 20th century, a lot of trans autobiographies, which for many people was sort of where they got their information about trans people. A lot of trans autobiographies use this framing of "I was born in the wrong body." And this is, a lot of trans people still use this phraseology. I still use it sometimes, although I started to realize that people just misinterpret it all the time. But a lot of anti-trans thinkers or people who became anti-trans really misinterpreted this, like severely misinterpreted this. They started to think that what trans people were saying was literally that my body and my soul are separate entities. And in Christian theology, particularly at this time in the mid 20th century, there was this big pushback against what's called Gnosticism. To sort of give a brief summary, Gnosticism is this ancient collection of Christian mysticisms that were prevalent in the sort of 1st to 3rd century. And what they believed, contrary to what's now considered the Orthodox Christian belief, what they believed is that precisely that the body and soul were separate. That the real God created the soul, and the soul is sexless, and then this lesser God, the demiurge, created the body, which is sexed, and stuffed souls into it. And that's what they think Adam and Eve is all about. So Gnosticism has a really bad reputation in Christianity. And one of the things that a lot of Christian ethicists do is when they don't like something, but they can't quite pin down what they don't like about it, they just accuse it of being Gnostic, because it works. Gnosticism has a toxic reputation. So I think this speaks to why the temperature is so high right now in terms of evangelical rhetoric on this subject, because a lot of this stuff isn't really designed to convince other people. It's designed to keep evangelical believers in line, because no one cares about Gnosticism. The only people who care about this are people who already know a little bit about Christian theology. And the way this relates to the feminist sort of angle, the so-called Terfs, is that Terfs essentially had the same philosophical objection to trans identities. They still do. In 1979, Janice Raymond wrote this book, The Transsexual Empire. It's infamous, it's toxic, horrible, full of invective and just it's like the 1979 equivalent of a transphobic soyjack, if that even makes sense.
Right.
So but she made the same point. She argued that trans identity is similar to Gnosticism, and she did this before any evangelical theologian had done that. So that this is the same fundamental philosophical objection. And nowadays there's a bit more of a divergence, at least with language, because feminists don't talk about Gnosticism because no one cares about Gnosticism. Instead, they say that trans identity is the worst aspect of postmodernism. But the objection is still the same, that trans identity is like propagating this schism between body and soul.
Is that a fundamental anxiety about like the spiritual realm being outside of the material? Or like outside of the body that we can physically kind of touch or perceive? Is that the anxiety there?
So on the Christian side, the anxiety primarily is that this is an issue of of soteriology, whether you're saved or not.
Yeah.
So if you don't believe in the argument, and it falls down under scrutiny, but the argument is that if you don't believe in the Christian, Orthodox Christian idea of the body and soul, well, then you don't believe in Christianity and you can't be saved because you're fundamentally misunderstanding what Jesus was about. On the feminist side, it's more about, after the Second World War, in books like Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex, there was really this pushback against the idea that womanhood is found in the body. Her famous phrase, de Beauvoir's famous phrase was, woman is not created such that society makes this being. So ideas of the social constructedness of gender were really starting to come into the cultural zeitgeist. And in the 70s, there was a bit of a pushback, 70s and 80s, there was a pushback against this. What was called, they called it somatophobia, fear of the body. There was a push to really reinsert the body into the conversation about how human identities are formed. And Raymond tried to position her arguments, and here in the UK, Germaine Greer tried to position her arguments as part of that pushback against somatophobic ideas about the body. So on the feminist side, it's anxiety about losing that connectedness with the body, that epistemological connectedness.
Right.
On the Christian side, it's about soteriology more than anything.
So, a lot of it to me feels like a fundamental, also like, and the theology that you describe and the philosophy fits into that, but this kind of opposition to modernity, and also the disrupting the natural order of one's body. How does that fit into the philosophy you describe?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. It does connect very much with sort of natural, nature-based moral arguments, and that connects with then the issue of reproductive rights, because the idea is that abortion is only made possible through the invasive presence of medical technology, disrupting nature, and trans identity sort of brings up similar things, at least where surgery is concerned, or hormonal changes. So yeah, definitely, it's about not just modernity but also post-modernity. The feeling that we are losing our ability to know things for certain. The argument against that has to be quite complicated because, well, yeah, we are losing that, but we're gaining a lot of other things as well. We're gaining the ability to understand human diversity more fully. We're gaining the ability to use Christian language, more fully appreciate the beauty of God's creation. So yeah, it is very much about fears in this sort of transitional phase that we're in between modernity and post-modernity.
And those fears seem to, from the Terf side, supersede anything that they previously opposed when it, at least like, just whatever, J.K. Rowling, we'll just take her as an example, who tried to, espouse certain liberal ideas. I mean, Dumbledore's gay, but I didn't put that in the book. I just decided later. But like that kind of stuff. Although when you look at oddly, I was talking to Matt about this. When you look at the way that those books end, the entire order is completely maintained, and there's nothing really subversive in any way about it. Why was Hermione mocked for trying to free slaves? There's a lot of questions about the philosophy, her political ideology before this, I would say. But, at least on the surface, these kinds of folks, they call themselves feminists. They believe in, I guess, empowering biological women. And before trans people, I guess, came into their eye line, they, in theory, would have been in opposition to the evangelicals, other movement that is most hateful towards trans people. In your analysis of this, like, how do they rationalize that? Is it just that their hatred of trans people is so overwhelming that it supersedes everything and they don't contend with those other questions?
Um, so largely it's a sort of slippery slope argument. The argument is I mean, there's not that many trans people. We're not a particularly good enemy because we're not that threatening.
Right.
But the argument is that we are this sort of spear tip to this broader attack on reality, on the idea of objective truth, on the idea that any truth at all can be found in the physical universe. It's connected with bigger anxieties, and I think one of the really important points that we need to draw out here is that often this alliance, this unlikely alliance between exclusionary radical feminists and conservative evangelicals, it gets described along the terms as essentially a marriage of convenience or a marriage of cynicism. That's often the case, but a lot of the time it really is to do with genuine, deeply held beliefs.
Of
And I think
essentialism?
uh,
Of,
of
yeah.
essentialism, of this holistic idea about body and soul, which they think we're attacking when we aren't really. It's we need to be able to we need to be developing better rhetorical strategies right now, because at the moment our strategy seems to be to just sort of shame the feminist angle, the feminist aspect of this alliance, for taking money from the wrong people. But it's not effective, and B, it's often not accurate because turf groups have a lot of money as well.
Right. Right. Well, what would be the major takeaway that you would want our audience to come away with about this alliance and the best way to combat some of these talking points by getting to the core?
Yeah, so unfortunately, a lot of this does come down, certainly on the evangelical side, a lot of this comes down to us getting our crap in order. And there's not a huge amount that people can do to accelerate that outside. But for those people who either are in evangelicalism or know someone who's in evangelicalism, a big part of this is, don't let them have this conversation without our voice being in there. A lot of the spaces where this stuff gets propagated, whether it's news networks, whether it's churches, whether it's conferences, it's a closed feedback loop. There's no alternative perspective there. And so although it's really uncomfortable to be in that space, we need to be there as much as we possibly can, as long as we feel safe. And then also, I would say not everyone involved in this alliance is cynical. Not everyone's a grifter. Not everyone is astroturfed. It's really sort of comforting sometimes to believe that that's the case, but it isn't always. And if we take that as our starting point, a lot of our communication is going to just come across as really condescending, sort of counter to their own experience. So that's the challenge really for us over the next few years. We need to ride out this current hysteria. It will go away, or it will the temperature will go down a little bit, and that's when the work really begins of developing better rhetorical strategies.
Well, Rebecca Jane Morgan, the book is Gender Heretics: Evangelicals, Feminists, and the Alliance Against Trans Liberation. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been really nice talking to you.
Yes, and we will put a link to your book in the description wherever people are watching or listening to this. Thanks so much.
Sounds great. Thank you.